Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Black Cops for Kamala call. And this particular call is all about Black women in law enforcement. And if you can recall, we started this whole series of calls with uh, our originating call on September the 19th, where we got together many of our allies in law enforcement, Black police officers, community members, and we talked about why we're supporting the Harris and Walz campaign ticket for president and vice president. So, after some deliberating and talking to the Harris campaign, we've decided that the best use of our voices is to continue to have conversations and to reach the people that we can reach wherever we can reach them. So, tonight we're going to be talking with one of my favorite people, Sergeant Heather Taylor. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her in a second, but just so that you know, the nature of this call is not only to tell you why we support the Harris Biden campaign, but to also make a connection to what we as Black law enforcement uh, should be expecting from one another and what we should be expecting from the government, from our law enforcement agencies, how we stand for the community. So hopefully you'll get some nuggets here. Chime in, ask questions, and I'm going to introduce Sergeant Heather Taylor in just a moment. Let me tell you who I am. I am Sonia Pruitt. I'm the founder of the Black Police Experience. I am a retired police captain of 28 years from Montgomery County, Maryland, where I broke the concrete ceiling by becoming the first captain, Black woman captain of that police department in its almost 100-year history. I'm also an instructor of criminal justice at Howard University and at Montgomery College in Maryland. So let me introduce my girl to you. Her name is Heather Taylor. Heather Taylor is a retired homicide sergeant from the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. In April of 2021, Heather assumed the role of Deputy Public Safety Director for the city of St. Louis until leaving that position in January 2024. During her tenure as president of the Ethical Society of Police from February 2015 to September 2020, Heather authored two comprehensive reports on corruption and racism within the SLMPD and testified before Congress about systemic racism in law enforcement. Currently, Heather spends her free time traveling to sporting events, reading, watching Star Wars movies and series, and socializing with loved ones. Hi, Heather. Everybody give a big round of applause and welcome Heather Taylor to the call. Hey, Heather. Hey, how you doing, sis?
I'm good. I can't complain.
All right. So I reached out to Heather. I was like, listen, we need to have a conversation, in particular with our sisters who are in law enforcement, thinking of being in law enforcement, and the people who love them. Because as you will probably find out as you listen to our words tonight, Black women need support. All officers, all Black officers need support, but we're going to talk about Black women in particular tonight. So I'm going to start off our conversation by highlighting someone who is really important in this whole history and legacy of Black women in policing and in law enforcement. And her name is Georgia Ann Robinson. Let's put up a picture of Georgia Ann so everybody can see what she looks like, y'all. This is Georgia Ann. So there is an, I know, right? There's a newspaper article with Georgia Ann, and in the article they called her the first colored, yes, as in a color, a box of crayons, the first colored woman policeman, and they put policeman in quotations, which I found really, really interesting. But we're not surprised because of when this occurred, which was what, in the late 1800s, early I'm sorry, I'm aging myself over here. The early 1900s. Georgia Ann, and I'm going to read you the story real quickly. In the person of Mrs. Georgia A. Robinson, Los Angeles, so this was LAPD, boast of having the first colored policewoman in the country. Mrs. Robinson is assigned to duty with the Juvenile Bureau and has proven herself to be a good angel to the delinquent children of this city. Because at the time, women, not just Black women, but women, they were matrons. They took care of the women who were in prison. They took care of the children, right? And then later on, in when we go deeper into the 1900s, they were meter maids. So policing was kind of a loosely used word when it referred to women. Georgia Ann's ability as a linguist, speaking fluent German, French, Spanish, and English, enables her to reach all classes of the city's population. I found that interesting that uh, there was a line drawn between class and the language that you spoke, because this was a time of heavy immigration into this country, right, from Europe. Um, Enables her to reach all classes of the city's population, and she has little trouble in winning the confidence of the children and their parents. Mrs. Robinson's success as a police officer has won for her the commendation of the city officials, and it is not at all improbable that there will be other colored women appointed to fill similar positions in this and other cities. And this is a story from 1917. Thank you, Terry. So she's like our ancestor in policing, right? And look at what she had to deal with. I'm not sure how she dealt with it. And some of her family members talk about her to today. And the legacy of us in policing started maybe not in LAPD, but that's the first story that we could find that was actually documented. So I say all of this to tell you that now I'm going to surprise you with the next picture of Sergeant Heather Taylor. Terry, this is Sergeant Heather Taylor. Look at Heather's face. This is Sergeant Heather Taylor in her uniform. I don't know, Heather, when this was in your journey with the police department.
Say around 2016 or 17. I think that was from DC for Police Week.
Okay. And so you had already started, you were already the president of the Ethical Society of Police?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
a couple of years in by then.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. How about the next picture? Guess who this is?
That's you.
That's me, girl, as a rookie, okay? My mother took me to Sears
Oh.
to take a series of pictures, and look how innocent I looked. I'm like, God did not know what was coming.
We all
We all have a picture like that. I didn't want to ask you for one. I was like, I'm gonna just surprise her with one. But you know, we put on a uniform. We had the best of intentions. I had a really great time in the beginning of my career with, you know, my even with not even with, but with my my colleagues and in policing. And we'll talk about when things started to change for us in policing. Okay. So I'm gonna thank you, Terry. So I am going to let me give some shout outs to Terry Watson, who's behind the scenes. When I say thank you, Terry, that's who I'm talking to. My friend and the founder of Strategies for Justice. So he's back there handling the background stuff for us, as well as Sean Kennedy, retired Chicago Police Department sergeant. So we thank you all for joining us. So Heather, I'm gonna jump right into this part. Can you tell us about how you came about becoming a police officer?
So I decided to be a police officer when I was pretty. Um, I knew I was going to be around 16 years old. I had a cousin who was a police officer, and unfortunately, my brother at the time, actually, it was 15 because my brother was 16. My brother was charged as an adult, as he should have been, for murdering someone. And just the pain the mother went through that I saw, my mom had to corner my brother pretty much and turn him into law enforcement. Trust him, you know, at that age, around that same age, my cousin was a police officer, my cousin Lisa. She was a police officer with St. Louis City, and she'd worked in juvenile, one of the first, the beginning of like a domestic violence unit for the city. And my brother was found guilty. He pled guilty because he was guilty of murdering, shot and killed a man. Didn't have the right to do that. My brother was my best friend growing up, actually my only friend at the time. Just shy kid. And after that, I just dug into basketball, and grades kind of, uh, that's how I survived, and went off to college. And my freshman year, my cousin Lisa, her mom, who was my aunt Denise, was murdered by a deputy sheriff. And I'm just so angry, just I knew the profession I wanted to go into based off of some good things and some bad things, that's for sure. And after my aunt was murdered, her murderer got, my brother was sentenced to years at 16. He was charged, he was certified as an adult, um, committed an adult crime, unfortunately, and but, he was guilty. And I went away to college. Freshman year, my aunt gets killed. And she's just like this bigger than human. Just, you knew her, you loved her. She was outspoken to the point. She didn't mix her words, kind of like how I am. And her murderer ended up getting 3 years, and he was in law enforcement. So, just a lot going on. And I survived college, and after that, joined the police department. I was fortunate to be hired, and came in with that picture like you were looking, like wide eyed, like yes, yes, this is amazing. I think most people know this story. If you know me, it's public, my story. And yeah, why I became a police officer. I wanted to put people in prison that murdered people,
Mm.
do that, hurt children. And also, because I wanted, believed I could get in there and change it, because the person that murdered my aunt, he got 3 years. As a matter of fact, when I was a police officer, he lost his gun. And I was a supervisor who had to help a young officer who was training enter it into the system as a weapon. And I thought it was ridiculous. So, yeah.
Um, so what I'm hearing you say is you, like many of us, enter policing because we want to change things and we want to look out for our loved ones and people in the community.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's funny because that's not why I joined policing. Let me tell you my story real quick, Heather. I was working at the Postal Service, U.S. Postal Service in administration. I ran into what I perceived to be racism there. I was like, you know what? I'm tired of working in this office anyway. I'm not following my dream, which was to do something in science. But I need to leave and I need to get a job and I want to be outside and I want to be around people. And so I became a police officer. My father was a police officer. But I wasn't following in his footsteps, right? And he wasn't telling me, here's what you're gonna need to watch out for. He was just like, do what you want to do because you're gonna do that anyway. And so it really didn't hit me that well, a couple of things hit me at the same time. Uh Several years in was that I would need to stand for the community and I would also need to stand for myself. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because one of the questions, I can ask you this question now. What was there some defining moment in your career where you had an illuminating, uh, like a big light bulb or a lightning bolt that said, you know what, this is not right, and I'm gonna need to say something. Was it before or after you became president of the Ethical Society of Police? What happened?
It's, I would say, pretty for me from the beginning. I walked into the police academy, and my cousin was sitting there. And my cousin, to death, still officer. We came to the academy together, and just the experiences. And this is probably everywhere. You have the black officer sitting with the black officers, white with white, and just some of the things that were said. I didn't stand for it. I didn't like it, and I would say something, even as a young officer. And I was fortunate enough to have officers before me that were with the Ethical Society of Police that said you have to join. Join. It's not in if you need us, you're going to need us. And I joined Ethical and was able to be a part of just standing up and just whether it was politics, a lot of things were politics. We were fighting um, in the state capital of Missouri, Jefferson City, against bills that were detrimental to progress for law enforcement or standing up, voicing our concern. And a lot of these things they're public. A lot of my life in law enforcement is, I guess, unfortunately, but fortunately at the same time, public like yours. The battles, and it's just too many times where I had something that maybe someone else wasn't willing to say.
Mhm, mhm. Oh, wow, you just said something really important where you said something where someone else wasn't willing to say it. And so I'm pursuing my doctorate, my PhD, and I want to write my dissertation on the experiences of Black women in law enforcement and trying to knuckle down on some themes, all of which we share. And we know that we share these experiences because we've talked to other Black women, like you and I have spoken, and we've spoken to other people. You as president of Ethical Society, me, the chairperson of the National Black Police Association, and all that comes with all of that, and meeting people and going to conferences, meeting people not just from the United States, but Black women in policing in other countries, and they are having this very self same experiences. And I was talking to one of my professors about trying to get my thesis title and my research down, and he said to me, "Well, how do you prove it's discrimination?" Which is actually not a bad question, but there was also a follow up conversation about you're going to have to go and find court cases where that were adjudicated and the Black women won. And I'm like, okay, we can barely file a complaint and have it acknowledged. Okay, right. And then you want us to go and find adjudicated court cases, which are going to be very few, to prove that there's discrimination. And for me, it's a we can't win that particular battle. We know what we experience, but how do you prove it, right? We don't need to prove it. I need to prove it for my dissertation, I guess. And I'll find a way. But it was kind of, I wanted to be offended and insulted, but this is what, this is how we live. And so you're talking about speaking when nobody else would speak. Terry, could you pull up Heather's story?
Oh my.
We're not going to go through the whole story. We just wanted people to see, because I think it's important. It's important that everybody sees what we talk about. I was doing an interview, as Terry's getting that up. I was doing an interview on MSNBC with somebody who's a well-known figure in social media, and it's a male, a Black male. And during the interview, my sound went off, and I didn't hear him say these things, but my friends called me afterwards and said, "This dude just threw you shade." He made a comment about Black police officers speaking out, or police officers speaking out after they retire. And I'm kind of glad I didn't hear it, because then we would have gone off course, because I would have had to respond to it immediately. Like, what the F are you talking about? Because I took all the stripes and I took some for other people too, because somebody had to say something, right? Somebody has to say something. We're not going to just sit here and watch and just let it happen. So here's Heather's story. Former St. Louis police sergeant wins $300,000 in discrimination retaliation suit. I was my pride in you, because I know what comes with that. I know the stress, the tension, uh, taking up your days of and weeks and months of your life to fight this battle, and that the battle's not just for you, right? Because you're standing for other people. So how does that thank you, Terry. How does that we're going to talk about what advice we can give to young officers, right? And why that's important. So I guess my question to you is why was that so important that you stand and that you go through all the things that you went through?
It's for the future, people. I'm not one to believe that black cops are the greatest thing that ever graced this earth. I don't do that. I have some black cops I would um, want to be alone in a room with, not because I'm physically scared of them. No, because probably because I want to choke them out.
Yes.
uh, I'm not one to believe that. We all have our own battles. Why someone would feel comfortable at one point and not comfortable at this point. You know, I don't, I can't necessarily blame some of them for it, because if I had it to do all over again, would I do it again? Oh yeah, I would fight it until the end. I know that when I go to sleep at night, I sleep well. I'm still a fighter. However, the fighting racism and discrimination, well, like I said, my story is so quick that people think they know you. What I've always been fortunate to have people say, pat me on the back, thank you. But what you don't know are the things that come with that, the stress, like worrying about people and others, and always have a voice of just like logic. It's just common sense right here. I'm not doing special. I'm just not afraid.
Mm.
I'm just not afraid. January was very. I left my job, working for the city of St. Louis. I left, and I'm grateful for where I am now.
Mm.
Yes, I think that was a great job, great, and all those things. But you have to start, and this is why some people choose not to fight. It's about your sanity. It's about your well-being, and people fight in different ways. My fight is not the way I fought with the Ethical Society of Police, is not the way that my cousin Donnie, who runs Ethical now, fights for
Mhm.
our community. I don't necessarily some of the things that current Ethical Society is doing. Oh, I'm very vocal with my cousin in person, and about some of those things, but I still appreciate that the work is being done. It's different for me. It doesn't mean that my way was the right way.
Mm.
And they have their way. Just like with people come forward those moments, and it takes a lot to fight discrimination, racism, sexism. There's a lot of issues just because we're women, white and black,
Mm.
Asian, Hispanic. It's hard. It's hard.
LGBTQ, everybody is getting some, huh?
And imagine if you're multiple of those, you're LGBTQ, and or it's just so much. Our country has issues, and law enforcement represents those issues as well. But I can just say that, would I do it again? Absolutely, absolutely. I fought for a reason.
Mhm.
I fought for this
I
generation to not have to fight it as hard.
Yeah, and do you think you were successful? Do you think that the legacy that you left in St. Louis made it easier?
I think it does. Uh, it's just waiting for that person that's not afraid, just like me. Uh,
Mm,
we it has been successful. We have like Shanette Hall.
yes.
We have officer, which is an officer, but or even my cousin runs ethical, and some of the officers that are there, their way of fighting is from my way of fighting. I'm in your face, very respectful, but in your face nevertheless. I'm not going to let anything slide because
Mhm,
there's one person that encounters law enforcement and has the worst day of their life at hands. So I can't let you, when you say or you do that, I can't do that. It
mhm, mhm.
wasn't
Um,
at all.
okay, Terry, can you put up my story real quick? So, Heather, I spent my first maybe almost 10 years um really not having any noticeable issues. Maybe because I wasn't keyed in. This is a story written about me. Well, written it was written after our police union started a web board, and officers could anonymously come and post on the web board. I see you shaking your head, girl. I know. And you can stop right there, Terry, because I want everybody to see that part at the bottom. Um, how I ended up being a target was because I was a corporal. I had backed up one of the officers on my shift. He had stopped a man for, he said, driving suspended. When I got there, the black man was in handcuffs on the side of the street, and he was standing there. So what I would generally do is to try to distract the person who was under arrest while the officers did their search or whatever. And I was talking to him, and I said, "So why'd you get stopped?" He says, "My license is suspended." I said, "Okay, that's an incarcerable offense in the state of Maryland." And after the officer searched his car, he came back, took off the handcuffs, and let him drive away. And I said, "You had somebody under arrest, you searched their car. You can't just unarrest somebody on the street. You have to take them to the station. And what were you looking for
Mm.
if you weren't going to follow through with the arrest? Because we just got a memo from, I mean, I had it all. We just got a memo from the commander saying, don't do that. It's problematic because, Fourth Amendment and all of that." And the short story is, he pushed back and started a rumor that I had made racial comments and that I was, had attacked him racially. Wasn't true, even though in the back of my head I was thinking, you know what, why did he do that? And is this something that he does all the time? So now my gears are turning. One thing led to another. I asked the sergeant to look into it. There was a lot of everybody's, hands up in the air, clutching pearls. I'm like, why is everybody getting upset? Well, because he was a high producer, and I was like, oh, this don't seem right. I continued to complain. I was like, this is not fair to the people on the street. And people lit up the web board. And that last piece right there, that last paragraph that says, they were talking about my husband. "Let him jump out and scream profiling at me on a traffic stop." A writer identified only as Irish Cop for Life wrote, "The only profile he's going to see is mine driving him into the pavement by his racist skull." And that's when it began. And, threats and maligning my name. And for the next 16 years, that's what I had to deal with. But I was okay with it, just like you, because I was like, you know what, this isn't right. And I come from a family of folks who gonna stand for what's right. I don't know how to do anything else. Thank you, Terry. So it was hard. I mean, let me just segue into the importance of Black police organizations. organizations like Ethical Society, like the Coalition of Black Police Officers. That's what we had where I lived. All the other Black Shield, the National Black Police Association. Those organizations were created in the 70s. Most of them, I don't know about Ethical, but most of these organizations were created in the 70s to stand for Black officers who were trying to stand for their communities and themselves inside police departments. I feel personally like somewhere along the way we've gotten too comfortable. Because when they were first created, there was a lot of pushback. They were traveling from city to city to stand for each other because if they didn't have the numbers, I mean, it was fantastic. And now we're in 2024, and you and I are having this conversation because we want to light a fire back up under Black officers because we're the ones who get to save our communities.
Yep.
We can't wait for somebody else to do it. And you and I are both retired, so our job is to pass on support, mentorship, and advice and wisdom. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, uh, I think it's hard too for officers to take that step, and you leave yourself open. It's a blue code of silence, brotherhood or sisterhood. And when you have, oh, you're opening yourself up for torture. You're going to be ridiculed. But at the end of the day, why did you take that oath? What you
Mm,
take an oath? And ethical was one of the first. And as much as I love them, I'm critical of them at the same time. Endorsing Republican, you know, I about fell out when I saw it. Like, really? Do you understand what's there? Or the FOP endorsing Donald Trump? You understand where we're going, where he's trying to go? He's not trying to leave office. And it's like how is we are going back to supporting why we're supporting people that hurt us to the point where we had to show that we existed by forming organizations and unions, and we're going back to people. I'm not saying that everyone that's a Republican is a bad person. I don't believe that. Democrat is some great person either. But when you're endorsing people of someone for governor or attorney general that has historically Missourians, especially poor, your poor Missourians, which are a lot of times African Americans. Uh, this is who you're endorsing as an organization. I think it's appalling. I love those guys, but we took a step back, and Black officers and Black cops, it's now or never. This election is so critical to the future of our country. I read one post and people chuckle. They're like, yeah, what is Donald Trump going to do for Black men? And when I read it, someone said, bring back slavery. And I was like, kind of chuckle. But the reality is that the things that he said have been so disrespectful to our race, so disrespectful to other races and people. My goodness, he's trying to stay in office. And to hear people say, well, we got a stimulus check. Really? Really? Or gas prices. No, 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 no. Yeah, gas prices, COVID, um, they were low. You know why? Because nobody was driving. We couldn't drive. We all had to stay inside for the most part. We work remote. So nobody was driving. So of course it's gonna drive the gas prices down. Oh, geez. Yes.
um, Heather, I too am, since you brought it up, having some difficulty with people. I'm not here to castigate Black men, but the people I'm about to mention are Black men. Um, People that I have respected for so many years. They work in law enforcement. Um, and I've, you know, having conversations with them about supporting Kamala. It was when I first had the idea and approached Terry about creating Black Cops for Kamala. And I reached out to them because I wanted, their support. I just made an assumption, which was not a good idea. I know better than that, right? And one of them said to me, well, I know some Black officers in California who don't respect her. I'm like, hell, you're not in California. So okay. Okay. What does that have to do with you? And so you're listening to them, but you're not listening to her. And then you're not comparing the two candidates. Okay. Then the other one said to me, the first thing they said was, I don't know. I know a lot of Black men who are upset with her about her record on criminal justice. I said, well, you should be able to correct that because you work in the industry. Are you not having conversations with them about that and all of the misinformation and the exaggeration? Can you give them facts? And he says, well, I support her. I'm like, no, you don't. Because, come on now. And then he ended by saying, because this was the last time I've spoken to him, because I just couldn't. The country's not ready for a Black woman to be president. And I was like, wow, why do we spend our lives waiting for people to get ready for us? Why in 2020 was I the first person to become a Black woman to become captain in my police department? Why are we constantly waiting? We're not waiting to act. Okay. We do what we're supposed to do, but we're still waiting. And I don't subscribe to the fact that she has to wait to become the president. We're ready for her. And so my mind is boggled, but we can talk about many reasons why we support her besides the fact that I am not trying to go back 300 years. And I'm going to end on this and let you take over again, Heather, is that if I'm a student of history, I love history. I am mesmerized by what happened during World War II and Hitler. And I see the same playbook. First, Hitler used our playbook with Jim Crow. And now the other dude who's running for president is using the Hitler playbook. I mean, word for word, almost line for line. And that Project 2025, that's really going to take us backwards. What are we going to do?
Yeah, I think there was a question someone asked about support with Black men. Oh, some of my biggest supporters were men. Um, Absolutely, Black women. My husband is a Black woman. He's voted for Harris, no doubt. And my biggest supporters were, but there also are some that I wouldn't trust to back me up on purpose, or that are so afraid of standing up that it's detrimental to their community, the other officers, especially those that come to work and actually do the job like it's supposed to. I love it. For 20 years was and it's unfortunate. If I still be there, oh, I probably would if I didn't go through everything that I went through.
Yes. Yes.
I can say that some of my supporters have been Black male cops. Eddie Simmons, the former president of Ethical. My cousin, Donnie Walters, we disagree all, but Donnie has my back. I agree with him. He disagrees with a lot of the things. Love, Sergeant Jason Love, one of my biggest supporters. We fought like cats on the board, fought all the time. But I think the time is now for National Black Police Owners to come out and support, because it sends a message when you have fraternal effort endorsing Donald Trump. We all saw what happened January. I will never forget that day. I watched it. It was horrible. The premise of being Trump being so back to blue, his supporters were beating police officers. American flag. No, are we trying to go back there? Because that's not law and order. That's disorder, corruption. No,
And
no.
chaos, girl.
Just January 6th alone is enough to say no more. And people are saying, and the good question, why should we support Harris? Do you want to go back to January 6th? Do we want someone that's literally been convicted, that has shown the level of corruption and disrespect for the Constitution, of the things that of what we go out and fight for? Donald Trump said he could be in a room full of police officers or anyone, shoot and kill someone, and nothing would happen to him. I think he's right.
Right. Um, Somebody posted a question about support from Black men, and you just answered. So let me start off by saying I love Black men. I love Black men, right? Um, my support in the police department, if the question was about Black officers, most of my support did not come from Black men. As a matter of fact, my experience, and this is just fact. This is not, again, me beating up me beating up Black men. I don't want to do that because I'm always stand for Black men. But my support, what I would get was, you should be quiet. You should put your fist down, Angela Davis. Um, yeah, I think I probably would have liked more support, but I will say this. Um, our Black Police Association was very, very active in the early years. It's when we started falling off where I noticed a change in that kind of support. And I'm not mad at anybody. I just would have liked to have had more support, because sometimes I felt like I was out there on an island by myself trying to hold it down for me and for other people, because I knew that every time I opened my mouth, I was going to pay for it somehow. Whether it was because I would have to wait for, listen, they were desperately trying not to promote me to captain. I knew that. And I was like, well, I'm just not going to stop. I'm going to keep pushing. And it was the community that supported me to get promoted. They were like, "What are you doing, chief? Why aren't you promoting her? She's more than qualified. She's shown you time and again. What is the problem?" My work record was stellar. They just didn't like my mouth, right? So I say that, all of that, to ask for our brothers to make sure that you are doing the best you can to support your sisters in law enforcement. And the more people that stand, the stronger we are. I'm with you, Heather. I'm trying to figure out what everybody was scared. I'm like, why y'all scared? Say something. Don't come over here asking me. They still asking, can you come? No, you need to say something. You need to stand for yourself. So that's the answer to that question. And then, about the election, because that's why we're here, right? We want people to know why we supporting Kamala, besides Kamala being a Howard grad. I'm a little biased, but there are some things like January 6th, Heather. I'm appalled. I'm appalled about what happened on January 6th. That was, I mean, we know the people that we worked with. But when have we ever seen so blatantly police officers fighting other police officers? Now, we didn't know they were police officers until later when they got arrested. But that was the reality. And they flying the thin blue line flag and everything. I'm like, is anybody besides me seeing this? You were seeing it too, obviously. We don't want that. We don't want total immunity. Go ahead, honey.
I don't subscribe to the thin blue line. I don't like it. Um, I just not really a big fan of it, especially when you see um, behind the scenes the FOP. You're talking. It's you're being hypocritical. You then say this is a brotherhood. We're beaten by people during the insurrection, and this is not brotherhood. No, 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 not.
it's not brotherhood. And the whole allowing someone to have full immunity, I don't know how that would happen, but I'm sure that, if you're a fascist, I always mess up that word, and you're trying to make it so that you're going to have total control of what, you find a way to make it happen. I mean, we've got a Supreme Court right now that's told the president, if you told the former president, again, if he comes back into office, you're going to have a lot of leeway and grace to do these things, and it's going to be hard for anyone to prove that this is not in the line of your official duties. I mean, like, is that crazy or what? That's what I, like you, don't want to go back to. And there are things that we have left on the table. Listen, Kamala Harris was a co-sponsor of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, right? And that never passed the Senate. We're still sitting here waiting for some kind of police change. I don't like using the word reform. How do you reform something that's working as it should? But that's why we're here, because we don't get to just drop the ball. We get to continue to fight, and demand and help force the change. And by the way, every time I have these conversations, I ask, what is a bad apple? Can somebody tell me what a bad apple is? I swear the FOP cannot tell us what a bad apple is. NAPO can't tell us what a bad apple is. That's the National Association of Police Organizations, y'all. What is a bad apple? Y'all said that, we can get rid of the bad apples. Who's going to get rid of the bad apple? And what is a bad apple? What do you consider that? I'm sorry. Just get ready to rant, ma'am.
And
So, Heather, what's a bad apple? What does that look like?
is the FOP, the bad apple. It's right before all day.
Okay. Well, yeah. I don't know, what to do with that, except that we get to dig the bad apples all by the root. At least that's what I was trying to do when I was actually inside the police department. So here's what I want to ask you. Because we have 10 minutes. What do we tell our young sisters? I teach at Howard. Nobody in my class at Howard wants to be a police officer. Now, I've had a few since we started the class say, they might consider it, right? But what do we tell them? What words of advice can we give them regarding their physical and mental health, mentoring and support, just advice?
Just, I think number one, and I think this is a fault that we all have, is not focusing on our mental health. And that's the start of it. You have to have an outlet outside of law enforcement. You must, because that'll be for your survival. You have to have something. Your life cannot revolve around law enforcement. You have to get a hobby. You got to get something. Do something. Travel. Do something. Because it starts there. Because if you're not mentally prepared for some of what you're going to see, you're going to struggle.
Yes.
And you're going to struggle to stand up. You're going to ultimately leave out of it. But it's such a noble profession when it's done right.
I agree. So what about, who was your mentors?
I had so many white officers, black officers. One of my favorite people was Sergeant Ralph Harper. He was murdered in, I think it was during COVID or before COVID, maybe. And I remember crying. He was this old grumpy, but was one of the best mentors. He would give you what you needed and always tell you, get it right. You really only have one chance to get it right. And these are the rules. This is the policy. Get it right. Because if you get it wrong, you're affecting someone's livelihood. and that's not what we're supposed to do.
That's right.
So my advice to anybody becoming a law enforcement officer, do it for the right reason. If you're coming to, you want to help your community, you want to be impactful, male, female, white, or who you are. If you really care about people, I'm a police officer.
Yes. I like what you said when you mentioned policy. My piece of advice would be, um, don't first of all, don't your mentor can look totally like somebody that you didn't expect. That was my experience all the time. And policy is so important. Policy and training is how police departments hold off or should hold how officers accountable. That's what it's there for. And so I chose to look at policy and training as a way to insulate myself and protect myself. So I always followed the policy and I paid attention in training because I knew that if someone was going to come for me, the first thing I was going to put out in their face was some words that looked like the policy. Well, this is the policy right here. I'm standing on this. And what are you talking about? So get to know the policy really, really well. It will become your friend in time of need when you least expect it. And know that there are people like Heather and I. I mean, Heather, I can see you can't stop, being there and talking about it and sharing your wisdom. And neither can I. When I retired, and Sean says documentation is so important. Yes, document every conversation, everything you do. Okay, just in case you got to share that information with the right people. Um, and gosh, you got me off my train of thought, Sean. um, but anyway, I want to say that it's just important for us not to have institutions. I always say that policing is the law enforcement arm of all of the systems, which are all connected: education, housing, the medical medicine, and the medical field, and uh, food. Just things are all connected, and they're not there to support our most vulnerable communities. And then they send the police in to be the enforcer in all of those systems, right? So we know that, and if we know that, then what are we doing? Okay, we need to be on the inside trying to figure out how to dismantle these systems. And I'm going to say this last. I had someone ask me on a call I was on once, about contributing to the system because I worked in it. And I was like, where do you work? Because you're probably contributing to a system too. I mean, we're all in a system somewhere, unless you work for yourself. And even then, you still may be in a system. But what are we doing to figure out where to put the dynamite to blow the system up? Like, you take down a building, where are we putting the dynamite? Okay. Um, we have a few more minutes, Heather. Is there anything that you might want to share about the importance of, we've talked about Kamala. We haven't talked about Tim. Tim's my man. But uh her her as a law enforcer, because she's part of the criminal justice system. What do you say when people say she, incarcerated black men, and she did all these things against our community?
I'll say that, I am one of the most vocal people um, when I was in the police department about arresting the right people and doing what was right. But as a homicide, so my detectives arrested a lot of black men that murdered someone. Um, there was a black man who murdered my aunt, who's a deputy sheriff. So if I have to arrest black men that commit murders and commit crime, what do you expect? A black man, black woman, white, I could, that's what race you are. If you're out here destroying communities, whether you're black or white, people in those communities up.
Mm. And how about this? Even if you're a black police officer, because Memphis is a prime example of what happens when you get really embroiled in the power of being the police and you forget what you're there for, which is to save lives, not take them, right? And so hopefully uh people who are listening to our words, who are already out doing this kind of work, we got to take care of our officers and make sure that they stay on the right track. That's our job, you know. I ain't gonna tell y'all how old I am, but I'm old enough to know that I need to pass pass this wisdom on. And I'm like you, Heather, I would probably still be in the police department had I not had to, you know, deal with the things I did. But we want officers to have longevity. It's a great way to retire. You know, you're set up with a pension, you got great benefits. So we want people to stay, but we don't want it to be so stressful
Yeah.
and counter to their health needs that they leave, right?
Yeah.
Or that they're threatened somehow. Okay. Well,
One other,
listen, go ahead. Go ahead.
it's this false belief that Harris and Biden want to defund the police. I don't subscribe to defunding the police. I think it's stupid. Who's gonna police people who are out here killing, robbing, and destroying communities all across the country, no matter what race they are? And that's simply just not true. There's funding and grant police departments, and that funding is used at the state level in various ways. And I think that people need to research voting, um, and especially us in law enforcement. Do your research on some of the impacts that you have that are currently affecting the police department that came from another administration.
Mm, yes, yes. That would be another whole hour of talking about that sort of thing. But sister, you know what? It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm glad to know that you're, you know, out there doing well and relaxing in your retirement. That makes me happy. Um, Everybody on October the 24th, which is a Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to have a Sankofa call. We're going to hear from our elders. I'm not an elder yet. We're not elders yet, Heather. We're gonna we're getting there though. We're gonna hear from our elders surrounding what we should be doing to uh, have our uh, have our sister Kamala become president of the United States and why that's important, and also a more of a in-depth conversation about Black police organizations and their importance to us. Okay, all right, Heather, you got any closing words?
I think anybody that's out listening that's currently a law enforcement officer, keep doing what you're doing. And please be mindful of your safety and the safety of your community that you're there to help. Don't make it worse. Don't leave the place worse than what you came into the department as. Leave it better.
I agree, and that's my parting words too. Sisters, brothers, others, everybody, we love you out there. Keep strong, okay? And we're here for you. You can reach me on at the Black Police Experience at therealbpx.com. You can email me from there, and there's my website. And if we need to get Miss Heather a message, we can get it to her. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you on the next one.